What if Lucifer was never just a fallen angel? What if before Eden, before dust, there was an empire, vast, ordered, terrifying, and at the centre of it sat not a serpent, but an emperor? Scripture tells us he fell, but from where? That detail is buried. Ezekiel calls him a merchant. Revelation names him dragon. Jeremiah sees ruined cities before Adam. Genesis begins with waters already broken. What is this strange world beneath the surface of our tradition? We inherited a simplified tale, a snake in a garden, but under it hums a deeper story, waiting. The sheer scope of evil in our world cannot be traced to a single temptation beneath a tree. Something older was broken, something vast was lost. You are here because you felt it. We will read Scripture as an archive, indictments, witnesses, an audit across centuries. From it emerges a forgotten civilization built on glory, shattered by pride, buried in silence. This is the hidden story of Lucifer's cosmic trade empire. And once you see it, the beginning of Genesis will never read the same way again. So like the video and let me know in the comments, have you heard of Lucifer's trade empire before? Now, the Bible preserves a case file scattered across centuries, witnesses separated by time, yet all describing the same figure. Radiant, powerful, fallen. You were told Lucifer rebelled, that he was cast down. But have you ever asked what he was cast down from? If we treat Scripture not as folklore, but as archive, a different picture begins to emerge. Ezekiel, writing in exile, records a lament that reads like an indictment. Ezekiel 28:12-18. He speaks not of a snake, not of a vague evil, but of a ruler. You were the signet of perfection, he writes, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. He names trading, sanctuaries, violence, profaning the holy. It functions like a charge against one who held office, violated trust, and was expelled. Isaiah taunts Babylon's king in language that overflows its human target. Ezra 14:12-14. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. In Hebrew, Helel ben Shahar, later rendered in Latin as Lucifer. Lucifer means day star. He claimed the council mount, reaching for the throne itself. This was treason, a fivefold declaration of sovereignty. Centuries later, John sees war in heaven, Rev 12:7-9. Michael and his angels fighting the dragon. The dragon loses, he is thrown down. But the timeline is strange, the details too consistent. Why does a fisherman from Galilee describe a cosmic legal conflict that echoes the indictments of prophets born hundreds of years earlier, unless the conflict they describe is older still? Hidden beneath their words is a buried reality, that Lucifer was once a prince in a high office, that he governed, traded, recruited, and then turned, that his rebellion was not a singular moment, but a campaign, and that campaign left behind a pattern of wreckage. The prophet Jeremiah, who is rarely read as a cosmic witness, saw it. In chapter 4, he speaks of a vision that does not fit the Babylonian context. He writes, "I looked on the earth, and behold, it was without form and void, and to the heavens, and they had no light. Cities without man, birds fled, mountains quaking." Does that sound familiar? It mirrors Genesis 1, verse 2. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. This reading suggests Genesis opens on aftermath rather than a blank beginning, a realm in need of restoration. Darkness, water, a scene already judged. Genesis may open not on a blank slate but on a crime scene. If that is true, then Genesis is not a creation sequence, it is a reclamation order. God speaks light not into neutral space, but into occupied territory, into aftermath, into spiritual debris. So, what do we call this civilization that came before? Scripture does not name it, but it describes its leader, a trader, a prince, one perfect from creation until unrighteousness was found in him. He walked among stones of fire. He was on the holy mountain of God. His sanctuaries were filled. His trade was abundant, until his heart was lifted and violence was found. That word, violence, is not abstract. It is judicial. It is evidence, a chargeable offence. And Ezekiel tells us what happened next. So I cast you as a profane thing from the mountain of God. He was expelled, but not quietly. I brought fire out from your midst. It consumed you. The scene reads like a trial and sentence, public, witnessed. All who knew you among the peoples are appalled at you. This was not a private fall. It was a public humiliation, a removal from office, a divine audit. Later readers softened it as poetry, but why? Unless the implications were too dangerous, they suggest a real government, a real system, a real rebellion. And yet the verses remain, scattered across the canon like buried affidavits, testimonies not from one age, but three. Across exile, empire, and Rome, the charges match. It is almost as if the Spirit preserved a case file across generations, sealed in scripture, waiting for the moment someone would open the books. It means the world you walk in was once a courtroom, then a battlefield, now a restored province. And it means we are not reading myths, we are reading records. But that was only the beginning. The first audit only revealed the smoke. Now we turn to the structure behind the fire. The cosmos, as it was before the fall. A realm where glory moved like currency, and the economy of worship held the universe together. And once you see that system in place, you'll understand what he tried to steal and why it had to be torn down. Before the fall, there was order. The heavens were not clouds, but jurisdictions. Scripture sketches ordered realms, thrones, dominions, rulers, authorities, Cole 1:16, a structured administration around the throne. Second Temple Jews preserved it, Qumran recorded it, and Ethiopia still reads it. Their scrolls spoke of watchers, holy ones, chiefs of tens and hundreds and thousands. Enoch, though speculative, paints a picture that matches the echoes found in Scripture. 7 archangels, each assigned to a domain, executing orders from the throne. And above them all, a covering cherub, a steward stationed not beside glory, but over it. Lucifer was a title, day star, light bearer, a prince who reflected glory. And that is the first key to understanding this system. In the primordial cosmos, glory moved. It flowed like a circuit. Angels transmitted glory like conductors, passing it through to the throne and back again. Worship was an economy, every host a node in the circuit. This is why the prophet Ezekiel lists gemstones as conduits of worship, the same stones placed on Israel's high priest. Lucifer bore them as cosmic priesthood. He was an instrument of reflection, a priest of cosmic scale, a merchant whose trade was not in gold or incense, but in glory. Ezekiel 28:14 says he walked among the stones of fire. Fire in Scripture marks God's presence. To walk among stones of fire was to stand inside it. That was his post. That was his office. He was created perfect. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created until unrighteousness was found in you. What changed? The verse tells us, "In the abundance of your trade you were filled with violence in your midst, and you sinned." The trade became the transaction. The reflection became retention. He blocked the flow. He blocked the flow and kept the glory. And the system responded. Because in God's design, worship is the operating system of reality. Glory fuels order. Praise establishes jurisdiction. Psalm 22:3 says God is enthroned on the praises of Israel. Where glory flows, God reigns. Where it is blocked, disorder takes root. This was systemic corruption. He traded glory to build influence, rerouting the circuit and fracturing heaven's order. This is the origin of spiritual entropy. Sin is not just moral failure. It is economic disruption. It is the attempt to profit from what was meant to pass through you. That's why Ezekiel uses language like trading and sanctuaries. It's the language of supply lines, distribution systems, sacred commerce. And when those systems were corrupted, the consequence was not just expulsion, it was instability. Revelation describes war in heaven as a legal response to sabotaged glory. He recruited, he traded, he redistributed allegiance, he turned worship into a black market, and a third followed him. Why? Because in a system where every being's worth is measured by alignment with glory, the illusion of a new path, a shortcut to status, was seductive. But it was false. Reflected light is still borrowed. And when the source withdrew jurisdiction, the structure cracked. Michael won by alignment. Lucifer's borrowed power broke when cut from the source. This is the second revelation. Worship is not performance. It is alignment. Glory is not a feeling. It is a force. And when misused, it breaks things. So ask yourself, what passes through you? You were made to reflect, not to store. That was his breach. But this system was older than him, stronger than him, and when the audit began, it revealed not only that he had fallen, but that the very economy he corrupted had become the foundation for his indictment. But the most haunting part is still ahead. The system resurfaced when he fell, in disguise, a counterfeit economy patterned on glory, but funded by self. But before we can trace the rebellion, we must understand the one who stood at its centre. Before the flames, he was a marvel. Not a rebel, not a serpent, not yet. He was the model of perfection. Every gemstone embedded in his covering was chosen. 9 stones, listed by name, the likes of sardius, topaz, and diamond. These were not ornaments, they were conduits. Each one would later appear in the breastplate of Israel's high priest, but Lucifer wore them first, built into him. His body was a sanctuary. He didn't just stand near the throne, he covered it. That was his office. The cherub who covered. In Exodus, the cherubim were commanded to stretch out their wings and overshadow the mercy seat, the seat of God's throne on the ark. Lucifer embodied that role. He was the living shadow of glory. His every gesture reflected the throne. He did not generate worship, he distributed it, a living veil. You were on the holy mountain of God, Ezekiel says. You walked in the midst of the stones of fire. Fire always marks divine presence. The throne in Daniel 7 burned, and Lucifer walked in it, not consumed, but authorized. This was his territory, his commission, and it made him shine. Glory did not bounce off of him, it radiated from him. And that is where the tragedy begins. Because when you are that close, when you are bathed in light not your own, the temptation is subtle. The reflection starts to feel like source. And worship, true, trembling, holy worship, begins to feel misdirected if it doesn't return to you. That's where it changed. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created, until unrighteousness was found in you. Found, like rot behind gold. What was discovered in him was not weakness. It was ambition, not rebellion in the open, but appetite in the heart. Ezekiel continues, "Your heart was proud because of your beauty." And again, "You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor." That's the line. Splendor was supposed to pass through him, but he kept it. And in doing so, he fractured what he was built to protect. His covering became a mask. His wings still stretched, but they no longer sheltered the holy. Covered it, yes, but not in reverence, in rivalry. And here is the part that is easy to skip. It did not start with words. It started with a look. The covering cherub stared at the glory long enough to fall in love with his own reflection in it. There was no proclamation. A subtle deviation, the sanctuary dimmed a fraction, and the audit began. This is why Ezekiel does not say, "You disobeyed," but "You profaned your sanctuaries." The word profane in Hebrew means to make common, to desecrate what was meant to be holy. He turned his own body, his own office, into a place of contamination. The instruments meant to carry glory became vessels of pride. This is why the fall was so severe. because the height was so sacred. No other being fell from such proximity, and God did not destroy him immediately. He exposed him. I cast you to the ground. I exposed you before kings, to feast their eyes on you. A fall from office in full view of the kingdom. Because when the light-bearer falls, something else always rushes in to replace the light. That's the pattern. When glory is withheld, the void does not stay empty. It gets filled with shadow, with self, with spectacle, pride disguised as brilliance, talent mistaken for source, beauty mistaken for authority, and every time it begins the same way, with a being designed to reflect who decides instead to absorb. So ask yourself, who taught us to crave attention more than obedience? The Covering Cherub did, and his mistake became the template. The one who stood closest to glory became the first to make it about himself, and still the glory passed through him for a time, until the audit concluded. And the one who once stood on stones of fire now waits beneath judgment. But the silence isn't the end. It's the key. Because if a being that close could fall that far, what does that say about the system he corrupted and the seductions still alive in us? Every rebellion begins with words. Isaiah records 5 of them, 5 sentences, 5 claims, 5 lines that split the sky. I will ascend to heaven. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. These are not outbursts, they are a manifesto. Each line is a legal claim, a jurisdictional grab. The first, I will ascend to heaven, challenges hierarchy. The second, I will set my throne on high, asserts a rival seat of power. The third, I will sit on the mount of assembly, declares a takeover of the divine council described in Psalm 82, where God presides. The fourth, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, seeks glory higher than the presence reserved for the throne. The fifth, I will make myself like the Most High, is not likeness but replacement. Together, they form a constitutional coup, a spiritual declaration of independence. Here, Isaiah names him Hillel ben Shachar, day star, son of dawn, in Latin, Lucifer. It is not a nickname but a title of radiance. He was already glorious, yet ambition demanded more. Reflected light became unbearable when compared to its source. Worship bent inward, and policy was born. That is why Isaiah's taunt lands on Babylon. The city embodies the same 5-fold ambition. I will make a name. I will reach the heavens. I will not be ruled. The ideology is recycled in dust. Pride institutionalized. So the questions remain: when did elevation become noble? And why do our systems still reward those who rise by disconnecting from the source? This was more than a fall. It was the launch of an ideology that declared the throne vacant. The verdict followed: you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. Isaiah records the humiliation. The witnesses staring. Is this the one who made the earth tremble? The coup ends in spectacle. Pride promises ascent. It collapses into shame. And yet across centuries, the sharp edges of this text were softened. The council became metaphor. The mount became symbol. The coup was taught as poetry. The risk of detail was too great for early catechism. The evidence was flattened, but the verbs remain, the ambition remains, and the echo still sounds in our own age. In systems where self is brand, in platforms where visibility is treated as virtue, in ideologies where power defines truth, whose ascent do you celebrate? Whose throne is being built in silence? These 5 lines were written to expose a pattern, one that repeats whenever glory is seized, whenever allegiance is redirected. Isaiah preserved them so we would recognize it, then and now. Every kingdom faces a crisis when power is claimed without authority, and in the courts of heaven, power was never seized by force. It was transferred through persuasion and through the invisible economy of allegiance. Lucifer's rebellion was not launched with weapons. It began with a campaign. Ezekiel gives us the vocabulary. In the abundance of your trade, you are filled with violence within. Violence is the outcome. Trade is the mechanism. And trade, in this context, means influence. The Hebrew root refers to merchandising, a movement between parties for gain. This was a commerce of loyalties. He traded worship as if it were his own to broker. He lobbied angels. He courted hosts. He made the case for a different order, one countered on proximity, on beauty, on visibility. A new system, but familiar in shape. A hierarchy that elevated brilliance over obedience, platform over alignment. His arguments were offered, and they travelled fast. Because every being in that realm was connected through the glory circuit, and when one node dimmed, the others noticed. Doubt spreads faster than fire, and glory, once questioned, becomes negotiable. The campaign took root inside the infrastructure of heaven itself. It wasn't war, it was a vote. A crisis of allegiance so profound that a third of the heavenly host turned their attention to the candidate beside the throne. This is how violence entered the system. The trade was subtle. It looked like admiration, but underneath, it was a transfer of trust. Lucifer stood near the throne and redirected honor toward himself. At first, it would have felt like reverence, a perfectly timed pause, an acknowledgement that didn't return to source. These are the micro-movements that set fire to the system. And as he collected glory out of cycle, he weaponized it by rewarding alignment. He offered status, position, identity. Every being created to reflect was given a chance to ascend by choosing him as the center. That is the trade. Glory in exchange for loyalty, worship for rank. And that transaction always ends in violence. The entire order of heaven was built on alignment with divine presence. When that alignment fractured, disintegration followed. And this is why the audit in Ezekiel ends with fire. Because violence in a glory economy isn't random, it's a breakdown of design. Worship misdirected becomes worship monetized. And when worship is monetized, division is inevitable. That's why Revelation doesn't describe Lucifer as a dragon first, but as a tail sweeping stars. He turned allegiance into a movement, a heavenly populism. And once enough turned, the courtroom became a battlefield. Michael did not initiate the war. He responded to it. Authority answered, breach. The dragon was not overpowered. He was exposed, and heaven split. But the blueprint of his campaign didn't die with his fall. It descended. It was encoded into Babel, codified in Babylon. It resurfaced in every empire that rewards image over integrity, assent over alignment. That trade is still active. It's the same economy that sells identity for attention, loyalty for platform. Lucifer never needed to convince the whole host. Just 1/3. The rest he planned to rule by force. The trade of violence is always partial. It targets the influential. It rewards the persuadable. It weaponizes nearness. And when the vote is cast and the system turns, the circuit collapses and judgment follows. This is how spiritual war begins. It did not begin with thunder. It began with silence, the kind that follows a sealed verdict, the kind that settles when all evidence has been presented and nothing more can be said. The courtroom was not empty. Thrones stood, witnesses watched, scrolls lay open. The glory that once flowed through Lucifer had curdled. What passed through him now was unstable, distorted, self-referential, overloaded. The circuit could no longer carry the weight. The sanctuary flickered, and the throne did not speak. It moved. Authority does not argue with treason. It reveals it. The moment the sentence was triggered, the war began. Not as a chaotic explosion, but as a coordinated purge. Revelation says there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. But Michael was not the instigator. He was the executor. The courtroom became a battlefield because judgment became motion. And Lucifer, now fractured beyond repair, still stood. Not because he was strong enough, but because spectacle delays collapse. He stood as a figure of brilliance, but the glory no longer flowed. What radiated from him now was counterfeit light, glory mimicked without source. The wings that once covered the throne now cast shadows across the host, and 1/3 had already turned. They followed not because they understood, they followed because the reflection was still convincing. That's how judgment works. It doesn't always strike first. Sometimes it lets the show continue long enough for every allegiance to be made public, and when it did, the rupture began. Scripture doesn't describe a skirmish. It describes a fall. He was thrown down, and his angels with him. This was no quiet exile. This was a cosmic spectacle. A sentence carried out before all thrones. A public removal of authority. And the language used is violent. Expulsion, cast down, hurled. Not because God reacted emotionally, but because the system rejected the breach. Just as a body expels infection, heaven expelled disalignment. It was procedural, clinical, but not without sorrow, because what fell was not only a being, it was a sanctuary, a vessel designed to carry glory, shattered from within, and that impact left a wound in the cosmos. John says the dragon was cast down to the earth. Ezekiel says kings would look upon him. Isaiah says he is brought to Sheol. These are not conflicting destinations. They are layers of humiliation, legal, spatial, dimensional. He fell through them all, from throne room to courtroom to ruin. And every layer revealed more of what had been lost. The dragon landed in silence, but heaven did not. John records a loud voice. Now salvation and power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. The timing is precise. The war ends with a proclamation, not just of victory, but of inheritance. When the accuser is cast down, the authority passes. The removal of the counterfeit clears the stage for the real. And here is where the story turns. Because the spectacle was never only about Lucifer, it was about succession. The son was always the rightful heir. But he does not ascend through campaign, he ascends through obedience. And where Lucifer demanded glory, the Lamb receives it by descent. The contrast is not poetic, it is judicial. One was thrown down for breach, the other was lifted up through alignment. And all of it, the trial, the war, the fall, was not to entertain the host, but to make clear the stakes of allegiance. Because glory is not static, it moves. And when a vessel cracks, it leaks. And when it leaks, it must be removed, or it will flood the system. That was the moment of war. The leak became a rupture. The rupture became a spectacle. The spectacle became a sentence. And the sentence became the turning point in a courtroom that had always been a throne. So ask this, what happens when judgment delays? What theatre plays out while the verdict waits, and whose light is still shining, even after the source has moved? Heaven has already shown us. War is never just about power. It is about placement. And spectacle always reveals the fracture beneath. The sentence was carried out in heaven, but its crater opened on earth. When Lucifer fell, he fell through realms. His impact was not abstract, it was geographic. Scripture records it with terrifying simplicity. The earth became Tohu-Va-Bohu, formless and void. But those words are not poetic, they are forensic. Tohu is desolation, waste, a terrain stripped of structure. Bohu is vacancy, emptiness that should not be empty. Together, they describe the condition of aftermath, the profile of a ruin. Genesis 1:2 is not the beginning of creation, it is the divine photograph of a crime scene. Jeremiah saw it later. I looked on the earth, and behold, it was without form and void, and the heavens had no light. That is post-impact language Cosmic infrastructure collapsed, light withheld, cities reduced to silence. Ezekiel said kings would stare at Lucifer and ask, "Is this the one who made the earth tremble?" That trembling has a location. It is not metaphor, it is geography. The place of his fall is visible. The ground still remembers. The sea still hides what it covered. And Genesis 1 does not describe the origin of existence. It describes the restoration of a system destabilized by war. Before the garden, before the clay, there was water over everything, deep, chaotic, covered in darkness. That was not Eden. That was the flood of Lucifer. And the spirit hovered above it because something had been interrupted. The throne room had expelled a traitor, and earth absorbed the consequence. Eden was not the first creation. It was the first recovery. A capital city planted on reclaimed ground. God did not plant a garden randomly. He planted it in the center of a battlefield, a sanctuary established on scorched soil. Stones of fire once lined the sanctuaries of heaven. Now they were repurposed as the foundations of a world in recovery. That is why the serpent was already there. His sentence had been passed. His stage had been set, and his intention was unchanged. The war had moved theatres, and this new creation, this Adamic project, would now unfold inside a damaged system. Heaven was clean, earth was bleeding, and the blood was not red. It was glory misused, misdirected, leaking through time, absorbed by ground, marked in layers. That is what Cain's crime unlocked. That is what Babel reactivated. That is what Babylon systematized. The wound was never closed. It was papered over with thrones and towers. But the earth still remembers. Every war leaves geography behind. Every lie reshapes architecture. And the garden was not built in ignorance of this. It was planted in direct defiance of it. An act of government, a legal insertion of holy territory into compromised terrain. The Spirit did not hover randomly. He hovered because he was inspecting. Hovering is a judicial posture. It implies review, witness, assessment. And that moment is still unfolding. The books are open. The Tohu was not erased. It was overruled. And the one who fell through heaven now crawls beneath its surface, surrounded by the ruins of his own ambition. The earth is not a blank canvas. It is a sealed record, layered with consequences, inhabited by accusation, and planted with purpose. Eden was a throne room disguised as a garden, and the breath given to Adam was not just life. It was legal placement, the beginning of human stewardship inside a courtroom that never closed. The rebellion was not only exposed by spectacle, it was preserved by audit. Ezekiel records it like a tribunal. By the abundance of your trade, you were filled with violence within, and you sinned. So I cast you as profane from the mountain of God. These are not poetic lines, they are formal charges. Each phrase functions like a clause in an indictment. Abundance of trade is motive, violence within is condition, cast you as profane is sentence. The prophet is reciting from sealed records. This is the audit of glory misused, a forensic account of a system breach. Ezekiel saw stones of fire, sanctuaries turned, and the covering cherub stripped of access. These details don't come from imagination, they come from documents. He was reading the findings. Heaven keeps record. Glory is not only experienced, it is tracked. Its movement is accounted for. Its redirection triggers review. That is the language Ezekiel uses. Procedural, legal. The mountain of God is not just a mystical peak. It is a location of government, a place of convening, council chambers, oversight thrones, case review. And when a sanctuary malfunctions, it is not only judged, it is documented. This is where Enoch's testimony becomes critical. The Book of Enoch preserves fragments of an older bureaucratic system. It names offices, categories of watchers, regional appointments, chains of authority. He describes angels who record transgression, others who file reports, others still who deliver sentences. Enoch was not writing fantasy, he was documenting operations. He tells of heavenly scribes who walk among cities and observe bloodlines, behaviour, and worship flow. These are divine auditors, silent, assigned, exacting. He speaks of tablets sealed in fire, names recorded, covenants archived. All of this reinforces the same reality. Rebellion is not measured emotionally, it is measured legally. And the law is procedural. It waits for the fullness of transgression before enforcement is triggered. Lucifer's case set the precedent. His trade corrupted the circuit. His alignment breach initiated the first audit. But he was not the only one under review. The Watcher system was already active. Before Genesis records the garden, Enoch records the bureaucracy, and those systems are still in place. This is why Scripture uses language like, books were opened, the court sat in judgment, every idle word will be accounted for. These are legal phrases. They point to a structured cosmology, not chaotic, not arbitrary, governed, indexed, investigated. The prophets did not merely see visions, they were granted access. Ezekiel read indictments. Enoch catalogued structures. Daniel was shown the court mid-session. John stood beside the seals. Each one recorded something procedural. And when judgment is described in Revelation, it is always shown as administrative. Thrones first, records next, enforcement last. This order is not cinematic, it is divine government. And this system still operates. This is why spiritual alignment is never private. Every shift in worship, every transaction of glory, every corruption of intent, these are observable movements in a court that never closes. And the earth is still under observation. Noah was not just spared, he was selected as a preservation clause. Enoch was not just taken, he was archived. Every action in the human realm mirrors systems already active in the unseen. And the prophets, especially Ezekiel and Enoch, were not poets. They were whistleblowers. They pulled the curtain back on systems older than language. That is why their books destabilize. They reveal how close the structure really island, and why silence does not mean absence. It means surveillance. The books are still open. The records are still active. And the watchers still write. Genesis opens with water, not dust. The record begins not at the top of the story, but in the middle of a sentence already unfolding. The earth is under review. The Spirit of God hovers, not as creator pausing, but as official presiding. The terms are legal, formless, void, darkness upon the face of the deep. These are site conditions, environmental descriptions written into the record as evidentiary data. The process that follows is procedural. Light is issued first, not as invention, but as jurisdictional boundary. Light divides. It establishes lawful zones. Then come the firmament, the waters, the land, all structured as domains with regulated assignments. Each act of let there be is a sovereign decree. Each, and it was so, is a completed clause. This is not invention from nothing, it is reorganization, restoration under governance, a legal reconstruction of a defiled realm. And when the record arrives at Eden, the pattern deepens. Eden is not merely planted, it is installed. Territorial language surrounds it, eastward placement. A guarded perimeter, flowing rivers as jurisdictional markers. This is the re-establishment of government on Earth. Eden functions as a forward-operating administrative zone. Its geography is intentional. Its boundaries are judicial, and the man placed within it is not merely alive, he is deputized. His breath is not just animation, it is placement. The image of God is not aesthetic, it is legal capacity. Adam is installed as a steward within a territory recovering from breach. His first assignment is not naming animals, it is maintaining alignment. Tending the garden is not agricultural, it is governmental. Eden is a court in recovery, and Adam is a witness placed under divine authority, supervised by watchers, and embedded in covenantal geography. The tree of life is not decoration, it is legal proof of access. The tree of knowledge is not temptation, it is a jurisdictional boundary, and the serpent is not an intruder. He is a sentenced official, reactivated in a new court. Every detail in Genesis 2 follows administrative sequence. Rivers divide the land into jurisdictions. Gold and onyx mark territorial wealth. The man is placed, then charged. Eden is both sanctuary and seat. It is the continuation of divine government in a reclaimed realm. That is why the language of dominion appears immediately. Dominion is not dominance. It is authorized governance on behalf of a higher court. Adam was placed as a representative, not as a king. His authority was derived, not autonomous. And this is why the events of Genesis 3 do not begin with disobedience. They begin with a breakdown of placement. The court is challenged. The serpent speaks not as a creature, but as a litigant. His argument appeals to jurisdiction. Who truly has the right to determine what is good? And the moment the man and woman act, the consequence is not only spiritual, it is spatial. They are removed, expelled from the zone of governance. Their breach is measured legally, not just relationally. Cherubim are assigned, access is barred. Documentation is implied in the language of divine questioning. Where are you? Is not confusion. It is audit. The same legal voice that hovered over the waters now walks through the garden as examiner. That moment is procedural. Eden is closed, but the record is still active. Because the assignment given to Adam was not erased, it was delayed. The earth remained under jurisdiction, and the bureaucracy did not dissolve. The watchers remained, the books remained, and the project of divine rulership through human agency was postponed. What was placed in Eden will echo in every covenant that follows. Territory, law, witnesses, and blood. The expulsion of Adam scattered conflict into human hands. The earth remained under review, and the displaced stewards began to build. The first city was not a sanctuary. It was a signal. Brick kilns smoked beneath the rising ziggurat. Language unified, direction vertical. Babel was not a tower, it was a transaction. The people said, "Let us make a name." This was their currency. Identity framed as monument, worship framed as architecture. Babel was an attempt to re-establish glory without alignment. It centralized speech, structure, and sovereignty in defiance of divine jurisdiction. The judgment was procedural, language fragmented, construction halted, but the design did not vanish. Babylon inherited it, each empire after borrowed its grammar. Towers, thrones, trade. From Tyre to Pergamum, from Rome to the cities of now, Babylon reappears not as a place, but as a pattern. Its power is not military, it is liturgical. Babylon monetizes reverence, it sanctifies visibility, it offers a name in exchange for alignment, it requires no belief, only participation. It makes loyalty a spectacle and worship a marketplace. Its temples host policy, its altars draft contracts, its currencies include influence, allegiance, and breath. Babylon is the spiritual infrastructure of the first rebellion, wrapped in human dress. Its architecture is borrowed from Eden, its sovereignty is borrowed from heaven. Its glory is stolen from the circuit that once served the Most High. Revelation records its economy. The cargo list is forensic. Gold, silver, precious stones, fine linen, purple cloth, cinnamon, incense, wine, oil, fine flour, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, that is, human souls. The final entry does not blink. The trade has always ended in people. Where worship is priced, people are priced. Babylon converts glory into inventory. It turns image bearers into line items. It rewards the transaction and conceals the cost. From the highest tower, the merchants watched smoke rise. Revelation says they wept. Not for the souls, for the system. Their language was grief over commerce. Who will buy our cargo now? In that moment, the mask dropped. Babylon's splendor collapsed like a stage burning under its own lights. The name they bought could not protect them. The souls they sold would not return. The spirit had audited the market. The books were never closed. The collapse was not sudden. It was scheduled. Babylon is not merely prophetic. It is present. Its symbols change. Its markets evolve. But the pattern holds. It tells humanity where they came from, who they belong to, and what they must do to stay secure. That story is older than language. It is older than empire. It comes from the mountain of God, inverted by a cherub, replicated in stone. Babylon remains the recurring mask. Every time a name is offered as currency, every time alignment is purchased through spectacle, every time worship is redirected toward profit, the pattern survives. The trade persists, but so does the record, and the watchers still write. The file was not lost, it was withheld. The early councils reduced the rebellion to essentials. Enoch's account survived in Ethiopia, but was exiled from the West. Other fragments dissolved into footnotes and fragments, hidden not from the curious, but from the pulpit. The motive was not malice, it was containment. Pastors feared dualism, scribes feared confusion. They debated what was safe for the sanctuary. They weighed divine unity against celestial complexity, and over time the edges were trimmed. Angels became messengers, not administrators. Thrones became metaphors, not offices. Glory became a feeling, not a fuel. The result was clarity. The cost was depth. In one hand, the scribes held scrolls. In the other, responsibility. Some lines blurred into apocrypha. Others were buried under caution. They simplified the cosmology to preserve the creed. But complexity withheld is complexity still active. The pattern did not fade. It migrated. Its software now runs in new temples. You live inside its update. The sanctuary is now a server room. Light hums through fiber. Liturgy flows through feeds. Commerce trains desire. Branding scripts identity. The worship circuit remains intact. Babylon reboots in code. The same exchange now unfolds in accelerated silence. Spectacle, alignment, access, trade. Revelation 18 still reads like a ledger. But now the soul is scanned, indexed, monetized. Worship is no longer public. It is ambient. And the attention it consumes is spiritual currency. The Spirit says, "Come out of her." But what does that mean for you? Where do you transact glory? What altars do you return to with your breath, your clicks, your words? Hidden for simplicity, visible in practice. The redactions were merciful, but they created distance. That distance became silence, and the silence became vulnerability. Ephesians 6 names it: rulers, authorities, cosmic powers, spiritual forces. The systems are still staffed. Luke 24 says Christ is the center of the story. But 2 Timothy says all scripture is profitable, including the pieces we trimmed. Somewhere along the line, the file was reopened. It sits now on your desk. You are reading the record, and there's a question in it. Not from the past, but from the pattern. Clarity gained, detail lost. Unity preserved, complexity redacted. Access expanded, dimension collapsed. The system remains intact, and the court still tracks participation. What was pruned from public teaching still judges our private habits. Babylon's engine never shut down, it simply changed formats. The prophets knew, and they spoke with tears. Matthew 6 describes the counter-economy. When you give, do it in hidden ways. When you pray, close the door. When you fast, wash your face. These are economic instructions. They rewire the circuit. They transfer value from spectacle to presence. They build treasure where moth and rust do not touch. Jesus names the core. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That sentence is currency law. It reveals that every act moves allegiance. Every gift, every prayer, every fast, every hidden forgiveness is a transaction in the unseen economy. The refrain is simple: give it away. Acts 2 shows how the first believers practiced this system. They broke bread in homes, they shared everything they had, they sold property to cover the needs of others. Their economy was not theoretical, it was daily. Simple meals became a counter-market. Shared water became a public sign. A coin placed in a poor man's hand became a declaration of sovereignty. Babylon prices bodies. The kingdom invests love. The difference is visible in practice. A widow gave 2 coins, and the audit marked her gift as greater than empires. Martyrs refused incense to Caesar, and dethroned him by dying. Paul wrote to Corinth that God's wisdom was not of this age, nor of the rulers doomed to pass away, but a hidden wisdom decreed before the ages. That wisdom is cruciform. The cross is the receipt of a transaction paid with blood. A forgiven debt is its echo. A reconciled enemy is its return. A table with bread and water becomes its market. Prayer, mercy, secrecy, generosity, each item is recorded not in ledgers of profit, but in the book of life. The pattern break is sharp. A receipt with line items, prayer, mercy, secrecy, generosity, and the total marked treasure in heaven. Another break comes when the neon glare of markets fades to candlelight at the table of fellowship. The empire cannot price what it cannot see. Hidden transactions remain untaxed. Silent sacrifices remain unmonetized. This is why the Spirit calls the believer to secrecy, not as withdrawal, but as warfare. Every hidden act is defiance. Every unseen prayer is a strike. Every secret gift is an investment. Give it away. That refrain unmasks the kingdom's economics. It creates hope that no empire can counterfeit. The joy is not loud. It is quiet. It is shared bread, forgiven debts, whispered prayers. These exchanges do not appear in markets, but they rewire the world. The reflection presses in. Where your treasure is, there your allegiance lives. That line measures us. It weighs every budget, every schedule, every click, every word. Babylon counts coins. The kingdom counts surrender. And the final revelation shines clear. The true currency of the kingdom is love. It circulates without devaluation. It cannot be hoarded. It multiplies when given away. And no empire, no market, no Babylon has ever found a way to monetize it. Revelation 18:4 calls with unbroken clarity, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues." The summons is a transfer of allegiance. Leaving Babylon begins in the heart and continues in habits that train desire. Psalm 1 plants you by streams, roots hold, fruit endures. To step out is to shift soil and reassign trust. Luke 10:20 says, "Your names are written in heaven." That ledger inscribes belonging. History shows the pattern. Noah entering the ark, Abraham leaving Ur, Israel walking out of Egypt, prophets drawing lines, apostles dropping nets. Each act a transfer of loyalty. The call continues now. Form a community that investigates, prays, shares, and resists together. Refuse Babylon's liturgies by embodying another at the table. Bread shared, debts forgiven. Mercy given, step out. Step out when worship is priced. Step out when allegiance is traded. Step out when spectacle demands attention. The choice arrives daily. What we uncovered is an opening to a larger investigation. The prophets and the sealed fragments invite pursuit. If you refuse simplified stories and carry questions others silence, this is your fellowship. This is a gathering for those who read the buried archives and test what was flattened. The pattern still echoes through power, markets, and attention. What signs of Babylon's template do you see now? Where do you discern the fingerprints of that ancient economy? Your findings belong in this investigation. Other witnesses wait in sealed texts and forgotten councils. The archives still hold their breath. The investigation continues. So hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, tell me what you think, and like the video for more deep dives into scripture.